Namaskar. The Pathankot air base attack, which was rather brazen in that India's strategic installations were close by, started on the 31st of December, exactly a week after Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Lahore in an unprecedented gesture to boost the new peace initiative with Pakistan. Indo-Pak watchers would no doubt see a pattern to these attacks and raise questions as to whether non-state actors are responsible or whether those responsible have an active support of the Pakistani state. Now, it seems that every peace initiative is followed by a terror attack on Indian soil, designed to stall the process. Most recently, soon after Ufa in July last year, there was an attack on Gurdaspur on a police station, and it's clear that these attacks are designed to derail the peace process. The question is not really of whether one takes the dialogue process with Pakistan forward, but how one does that. And to discuss this and the Pathankot attack and its impact on Indo-Pak ties, we have with us in the studio Alok Bansal is the Director for Security and Strategy at the India Foundation, and Satyabrata Paul is a former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. We'll start with you, Mr. Bansal. Can Jaish-e-Mohammed mount such an attack? You know, reports suggest that the terrorists involved in this attack were better trained than the 2611 terrorists without the active participation of some other sources.
See, one must understand that Jaish was initially nurtured by the ISI. It was very close to the security establishment of Pakistan. But of late, Jaish has been distancing itself. In fact, there have been certain attacks on security establishment, and Jaish of late has been gravitating towards the global jihadi outfits. Okay. There have been a large number of Jaish members who have actually moved to IS and even to Al-Qaeda. The motivation levels are obviously higher as far as Jaish is concerned. And that also gives us a window of opportunity as far as talks are concerned, because unlike Lashkar, Jaish's relationship with ISI at this point of time are a little ambiguous. You can't say it has that Gordian knot as was the case with Lashkar and other organizations. Obviously, the way the attack has gone about shows the level of motivation of the terrorists, which has been very high. And we had the intelligence, and we have managed to thwart any major damage to the security installations of the airbase. But we have had to pay a very heavy price. And I think the operation as of now is still going on. And that shows the level of preparedness and motivation. And I think that is where we need to pay a greater attention. Of course, there are still very lot of loose ends. The way in which they kidnapped superintendent of police, then let him go, used his phone to communicate with Pakistan. There are certain loose ends which one needs to tie them up, because still the whole narrative is not foolproof.
Okay. Mr. Paul, is it possible to conduct normal relations with a country that seems to have a state within a state, you know, that has a deep state in a sense?
No, what you're trying to do is to see if you can move towards a semblance of normality. The whole process of engagement that the Prime Minister has now set in motion is the latest in a series of attempts made by Indian leaders in the past to try to solve this particular riddle. Clearly, you are engaging with the overt state, the shallow state, shall we say. And there is, as you say, a deep state with which you cannot by definition have any contact, or at least none has been possible so far. You deal with what you have.
Okay.
Now, again, by definition, the moment you have a process that might lead to normalization, you then set in motion a train of events that inevitably leads to the weakening of the deep state. And therefore, the deep state, or elements within the deep state, the Pakistani security establishment, opposes it tooth and nail.
Okay.
And therefore, the Jaish attack, followed by the attack on our consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif, are part of an ongoing pattern, which you referred to in your introduction. That every time there's an attempt at holding out an olive branch, at setting in process a or setting a
Normalization, yeah.
process that might lead eventually to normalization. Inevitably, there will be attempts to derail the process.
Right. Mr. Bansal, this has happened just a week after the Prime Minister went to Lahore. And can something be salvaged? You were mentioning, that can something be salvaged from that meeting in Lahore, the sentiments, and be brought to the table to India's strategic advantage in the dialogue?
See, I think, as I said, at this point of time, it will maybe a little premature to jump to conclusions, because if Pakistani government actually acts against the perpetrators, because there are a lot of linkages, and Pakistan, since we have said it is Jaish, it may be feasible for Pakistan's establishment to at least go through the motion, try and arrest some people who they communicated with, certain information can be passed on.
But isn't the Jaish, the LET, aren't they all still close to the Pakistan military?
I wouldn't say so that the Jaish is so close, because Jaish in between has been targeted. In fact, Jaish's militants were also involved in attacks on Musharraf. And in fact, in between, Jaish had actually gone into decline. In fact, Jaish's revival in recent past is, of course, a very, very significant factor. And we must remember that Jaish militants today are gravitating towards global jihadi outfits.
That's what
so
you said,
the level of motivation of Jaish militants is definitely higher. There are problems with the Pakistani establishment as well.
Okay.
So at this juncture, if Pakistani establishment starts actually, which they should ideally be doing, is to start helping the Indian establishment try and round up some of these perpetrators, maybe take certain drastic actions against it, I feel the talks can be salvaged. Because please understand, Nawaz Sharif has a vested interest in the talks succeeding, because from Nawaz Sharif's point of view, the military salience in the body politic of Pakistan stems from this existential threat which Pakistan's military actually projects in Pakistan, which they try and show as if there is an existential threat from India, and they are the saviors of the nation. So Pakistan's, if this India-Pakistan amity and friendship progresses further, the salience of Pakistan's military will reduce in the body politic of Pakistan.
Mr. Paul, at UFA also, the two countries had decided to talk about terrorism. And Mr. Bansal seems to suggest, terrorism can still be the main focus of dialogue. And so if that is really going to be the focus of dialogue, Pakistan has this problem where it is both a manufacturer as well as a victim of terrorism. So, and if there are certain elements within the Pakistan, those terrorist groups which are moving towards global jihadi outfits, there can be some sort of relationship that India can develop in terms of, counter-terrorism with Pakistan itself to put these groups in order.
I think let's be clear that any discussions at the moment for the foreseeable future between India and Pakistan on terrorism are unlikely to bear much fruit. Simply because we do not yet have evidence that those who have controlled the terrorists in the past have abandoned them. Nor indeed is there any reason for them to do so. It is true that under General Raheel Sharif, the Pakistani army has launched a pretty sustained campaign against the terrorists in the northwest. But that's a very targeted operation, targeted precisely at those who would be considered part of the global jihad. Now, it is not Jaish, and here I think I would like to introduce a nuance to what Mr. Bansal said.
Yes, please.
Jaish as a whole, as far as I know, has not gravitated towards either the
Islamic State or whatever, Al-Qaeda
or to Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
What had happened was that after it was banned following the attempt on Musharraf's life, when it became a target of the Pakistani state, there was a rift within the organization, and a very significant part of it pledged its allegiance to Tehreek-e-Taliban.
Yes.
That too then has changed, with that faction now pledging its allegiance to the IS. But the fact that we are now looking at a Jaish operation being conducted in India would seem to indicate that they have at least in some part, been rehabilitated with their erstwhile patrons.
Okay.
That being the case, it in a way enhances our problem.
Okay.
It also, of course, since officially it is still a banned organization in Pakistan, it does permit the Pakistani state to act much more freely. Here I completely agree with Mr. Bansal. It can, in order to show its bona fides vis-a-vis India,
Yes.
it can, if you were to share with them quickly what we have picked up in intelligence intercepts and so forth,
Okay.
it can demonstrate its honesty, its
Absolutely.
goodwill by acting quickly against
Sure.
these elements.
And Mr. Bansal, if the Pakistan state does not act against Jaish, then is it worthwhile really, talking at all? Because at the end of the day, there may be groups, there may be institutions, there may be whatever in Pakistan who are willing to have peace dialogue with India, but there are others who hold it to ransom, and those are the ones that seem to be succeeding and all the time derailing the process.
See, if Pakistani state does nothing, then obviously it will be very difficult for any government in India to negotiate with Pakistan beyond that, because the domestic opinion is already turning against talking to Pakistan, and the perception is that any attack that takes place across border has some sort of a tacit support of the Pakistanis' deep establishment.
Yes.
And if the Pakistani state doesn't act against these, then it will be presumed
Does
that
it have the capacity to act is also a question.
well, that's an important issue, and as I said though Ambassador Pal said, but in last few days, if you actually look at it, last 10 days or so, if you read the Pakistani media, there have been a number of IS operatives who have actually the Jaish operatives who have gone and joined IS. In fact, recent attack in Kunar also, there were certain Jaish people where the IS was targeted. There were certain Jaish members who were present. So there are certain indications which show that Jaish is colluding with IS. Whether they have the capacity, I have always said that as far as the influence of global jihadi outfits like IS are concerned,
Sure.
we tend to undermine their influence in India. What we have seen, the dozens of people who have been going to Iraq, Syria, etc., this is just the tip of the iceberg. But the radicalization is growing, and I think that enables these militants from across the border to come and launch that sort of attack. And I feel at this juncture the government of India must pressurize Pakistani government, give them all the leads that we have got, because there are telephonic conversations which have been conducted with people, with their handlers in Bahawalpur. People have spoken to their families. I think those links must be investigated by Pakistan. Also, I think there are certain loose ends, as I said,
Sure.
at our end, which needs to be investigated as to because with such a pinpointed intelligence information, the operation is still going on.
Yes.
It really does not. We could have done better, probably.
Right,
so
but
that shows that maybe there are certain people this side also who are colluding or who have colluded with those militants.
Ambassador Pal, but we have seen that Pakistan has moved slowly, especially with the 26/11 terror attack case. And so, no one really gets the impression that things are going to move fast there. Is it possible, when public opinion on both sides, let's say, in the media, there are these peace constituencies. People really want, peace between the two countries. To continue dialogue, at least, at that level, where people are actually happy and wanting to have peace, and then isolate those who are not wanting to have peace, and then see whichever opinion builds up over time and one overtakes the other.
But that's really been the effort of several governments here,
Yes.
and the last 2 or 3 governments in Pakistan. And in this, the Pakistan government certainly has been helped of late by the fact that if you look at what constitutes a society, in Pakistan now, you would have to say that there is a broad consensus that this abnormal relationship with India is not in Pakistan's hands. That doesn't help Pakistan.
Doesn't help them at all, yes.
And that this is something that should be brought to an end. That is certainly the opinion of the political establishment not least because, as Mr. Bansal said, and I completely agree with him, that peace immediately undermines the special position of the Pakistani army and by definition strengthens the political forces. Civil society, for the same reasons, does not like this abnormal situation where Pakistan says that it is continually under threat, because that leads to a diminution of civil liberties, of violations of human rights, all in the name of security. So civil society broadly supports the peace process. The academia, by and large, supports the peace process. Again, because it sees no intellectual reason for this unending hostility.
Okay.
And certainly the very important change that of late the business community sees it that entirely in Pakistan's own commercial interests and theirs for there to be a normal trading and investment relationship between Pakistan and India.
Right.
They, as it were, want to feed into the India growth story. So it clearly already is the case that it is the bulk of the country that would, given half a chance, grab the opportunity for peace. And that is the constituency that we have to strengthen. Unfortunately, all of them, like the rest of us in India, are held hostage by those who have the power to abort the process.
So, Mr. Bansal, do you foresee the Pakistan army becoming weaker over time? You know, given the nature of Pakistani society, as Ambassador Pal was saying, that certain constituencies are growing, and you know, in their importance, at the cost perhaps of the army.
See, let me make it very clear. Firstly, as far as the civil society in Pakistan is concerned, it's a very minuscule constituency. Army, of course, at this point of time has a vested interest in supporting talks. And I think that's one of the reasons that in past few
Could you explain that, please?
What I wanted to show was that the Pakistan's army is overstretched at this point of time.
Okay.
You have Zarb-e-Adl, which has been going on from 15th June 2014. So it's 1.5 years plus. If you see the territory of North Waziristan, it's a very small territory. They've still not been able to clear it completely. The Karachi operations has been going on from October 2013, and they have hit certain roadblocks because now PPP, MQM have all started coming out openly against the operations.
Okay.
So they are in a problem. The operations are also going in other FATA agencies like Bajor, etc. It's going on. So army feels they are stretched. There is no doubt about it, and at this juncture they feel that there is no point in unnecessarily.
So isn't that actually a good time to be talking to Pakistan?
Yeah, it's a good time, but please understand there is another important factor which you must understand, that contrary to what people believe, there is a very, very significant chunk of Pakistan's armed forces which are radicalized, especially at the lower level and the mid level, and these people have every interest and intention of pitting India against Pakistan. And like in most armies today which are deployed on front, you have considerable autonomy with these people, like LOC firing, the border firing. This is actually left to the local commander of the scene, and if that individual has proclivities towards Lashkar, Jaish, which many of them have, so you would find that at local level they would be supporting that. So as I said, at this juncture I have reasons to believe that General Raheel Sharif genuinely wants that India and Pakistan should talk. At the same time, he wants an insurance, and as a result the turbulence in Punjab that you are seeing may as well be instigated by ISI, because he would want to create circumstances where India does not become adventurous, and for that they could do that. But talks, it is in their interest that the talks must go on. Weakening of the army will take, I think, a long time, because this is 2016 is the year when the army chief is supposed to change, and if that change takes place towards the end of the year, the army chief may become weaker, because in Pakistan's politics, the moment a new army chief is named, that transition period is the only period when I think really the political leadership has a little bit of an upper hand vis-a-vis army.
Ambassador Pal, we have a 3,000 plus kilometer border, and it's pretty well guarded, but infiltrations are continuing despite that, and now they seem to be moving towards the Punjab area, a change of strategy perhaps. But how important is, keeping our border secure and strong in dealing with Pakistan at the diplomatic level? When we have a secure border and they can't, and if we believe that instruments are infiltrating cross-border terrorism is their means. If it's secure, then at the end of the day, yes,
clearly that is
the prerequisite.
A prerequisite, and it's a continuing process.
But have we let our guard down a little bit?
I really wouldn't have the expertise to comment on that. I would hope not. And given the fact that we seem to have deployed not only forces but equipment that is fairly advanced, I take it that our security forces have done the best they could. Even then, given the nature of the terrain, there are sections of both the international border as well as the LOC where it is almost physically impossible to prevent a determined group of infiltrators, particularly when they have official support from across the border and the LOC.
Right.
But certainly that is an ongoing process. Now,
Yes.
in this particular instance, in Pathankot, for instance, it is not just the fact that they managed to infiltrate into India. These were 5 or 6 heavily armed men in Indian Army fatigues who could not possibly have simply crossed over territory controlled and patrolled by the Pakistani Army and the Pakistani Rangers unless they were let through.
Okay.
So clearly the entire operation would not have taken place without support.
Mr. Bansal, so then is it possible, as technology has improved, we have GPS systems, we have all these, it's much easier to probably monitor these kind of things, this kind of infiltration that takes place. Even though the border is fenced, a breakage through that is one way, or through intelligence gathering because, somebody around sees things happening like that. But through modern equipment and surveillance, isn't it possible to actually watch all this?
See, it's not possible to have a foolproof surveillance. Please
but are we
understand.
moving in that area?
Please
Can defense technology move in that area?
Let me make it very clear. The United States is the most advanced country in the world. It's not been able to stop infiltration from across Mexico inside its borders. Now, in India, in this particular area, this is Gurdaspur region,
right,
you have a large number of water streams crisscrossing the border. Now, wherever there is a water stream, infiltration will always be possible because the fencing is on top of the water stream. If the water level rises and falls, you have a area through which a determined infiltrator can always come in. And that is one of the issue which happens. And that's why this area has always been prone to infiltration. The only way is to increase the number of people, probably
you
have
seem to be running short of time, so let me just ask you both of you one more question each. We'll start with you, Mr. Bansal. What do we need to be vigilant now for? Is there, because of the scale of attacks that can take place? After all, there's also an attack that took place on near our consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif. So, things are changing. The dynamics are changing. What do we need to be
I think
vigilant
undoubtedly
for?
we have to be prepared for this sort of attacks and I think counter them. And I think certain security measures have to be enhanced both on borders as well as I think this free availability of Indian Army fatigues for anyone to wear is actually a serious issue which has been pointed out in these programs a number of times. The government must crack down. Not anyone and everyone should be able to put on Indian Army fatigues and move around.
Okay.
I think that is a very, very important factor because that would reduce the lethal impact of these terrorists coming across and doing this sort of things.
And Ambassador Pal, can the relationship with Pakistan be sustained through the diplomatic route only, or does it require, a few warnings and certain messages that are beyond diplomacy?
Well, diplomacy involves the conveying of tough messages. Those of us who have argued for a sustained engagement say precisely this, that unless you continue to engage, you will not be able to convey the messages that you need to.
Okay.
So, on the one
under
hand,
the circumstances, what is the kind of message that one gives out?
On the one hand, if you break off engagement now because of Pathankot and Mazar-e-Sharif, you have in fact conceded defeat to those who wanted to use these incidents to derail the process. So in my view, you have to continue. But when you continue, or if you continue, you must also make it absolutely clear that it would be impossible for a democratically elected Indian government answerable to public opinion to continue with the process if simultaneously the Indian state and institutions of the Indian state abroad are subjected to these attacks from elements that we know enjoy the support of the Pakistani or elements of the Pakistani state. That would be part of the continuing dialogue with Pakistan.
So what do you see as, the short-term measures that India is going to take, to deal with this kind of a situation?
Look, I really would not presume to advise the government on what it needs to do. I'm sure they know best. But there is one step that is urgent, which I hope the Prime Minister will take. He is a superb communicator. There is a great deal of confusion in the mind of the common man and woman.
Yes.
Why has the Prime Minister changed course from the very tough line he took earlier, no talks while terror continues, to what he has done now? I think he needs to communicate to the government.
Right.
He needs to explain that this is
Right.
an option that he has taken with India's best interests in mind.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on this special discussion. Well, the Pakistani media, they have by and large reported that the Pathankot attack will pose a challenge to the attempts to resurrect the dialogue process. And this is what the Express Tribune in Pakistan says. And the News International there, it seems to have suggested that even though the dialogue has been derailed by similar incidents in the past, they feel now that the latest negotiations would prove more durable. The Dawn, it believes that Foreign Secretary level talks will go ahead. They are scheduled to meet on the 15th of this month, but the atmospherics would be impacted by Pathankot. And here in India, as the 7 brave martyrs who laid down their lives to defend the nation from this brazen attack are laid to rest, their supreme sacrifice will remain an inspiration and a reminder that the stronger our force, our defense, the more strategic is our advantage in dealing with forces hostile to India's interests. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.